Hey guys, Matt here again. I thought I'd do a talk about something a bit more sort of general. Um, we've kind of we've kind of dived straight into some really sort of deep areas, sort of quantum physics and time and metaphysics and so on and so forth. But I thought I'd talk a bit more about this kind of general feeling for philosophy and sort of perhaps try and explain to myself, if anyone else, what I'm doing here and what's the point in all this. So I suppose the first thing, just from my personal sort of point of view, I just can't help doing it. It's just curiosity. I think there's something sort of actually quite fairly ordinary about this. I mean, just human beings have always wondered about what's beyond that next horizon, or what's over that hill, or beyond the mountain, and so it's kind of like for me, it's the ultimate quest. Um, so it's kind of, and I also feel like a duty towards it as well. In some sense, I sort of feel that if we can figure out what we actually are, right, then we have a better chance of figuring out what to do and how. So it's kind of like we don't really know what our role in this universe is, right, and what we ought to do unless we know what we are. And we're surrounded by all of these different sort of theories and ideas from religion, science, politics, kind of localism, internationalism, and you've got all of these kind of bickering sort of groups pointing the finger at each other and slinging dirt, and there's moral arguments, and if you sort of really zoom out to a kind of galactic scale, just imagine if you could increase your species awareness or something to 1,000 years and see other aliens. You'd see some of our disputes as so ridiculously petty and so kind of edge casing in a way, sort of just really petty little minor boundary disputes and stuff. But obviously here on Earth, looking out, they feel extremely serious. And people take their traditions and their parents and grandparents and progenitors' traditions and customs extremely seriously. And because of the deep love that we feel for each other as very, probably quite scared mammals, warm-blooded, sensitive, scared, compassionate creatures, we gather around these kind of ideas and traditions, and we find safety in numbers in some sense, that they give us some meaning. They give us a role in this world. And so, you know, but the point is that we end up squabbling about these customs and traditions and so on. So for me, just take a snapshot of the world at the moment, with all the various disputes and political sort of geopolitical struggles and tensions and so on. We're like a bunch of squabbling teenagers in a playground. Um, and that's kind of really always bothered me when you sort of think we should be looking to our elders for wisdom. And just ever since I remember watching TV and the fucking news, it's just a bunch of old geezers, sort of beating their chests, really. Um, and so, that I find that sort of quite tragic when you think that, there's been millions of years of evolution to go into, producing these kind of upright apes that can build things like the Sistine Chapel, and that we still, you know, gather around such petty sort of movements and disputes and stuff. So that that's it's kind of like there's an inherent sort of disappointment in being human when you think, oh my god, I think of the capacity, the great things we can achieve, and then they just see people just beating the shit out of each other for no real sort of reason. I mean, look at World War One. I mean, this could get quite depressing quite quickly, but I'll be brief. But World War One. How many millions of people just chewed up with heavy industry, really, and so you know, the sheer sort of futility of that is quite upsetting. So for me, I don't know. I mean, and it seems to be that philosophy is behind some of the great revolutions in thought and in science, and things that have actually challenged the status quo and sort of old hierarchies and so on. That seems to be born out of philosophical thinking. So philosophy just naturally seems to have a sort of political, association, without a shadow of a doubt. And I mean, I think there's several thinkers that would say that actually philosophy's role is actually to provide guidance and wisdom to our well, maybe to our rulers or just to ourselves, because the presence of rulers isn't a necessary truth; it's a contingent fact. So yeah, so I mean, I think for me, it's kind of like we've got all these people squabbling about what's really going on in reality, and so I think it would be helpful to have a view that could potentially sort of appeal to everybody and actually not necessarily even contradict everybody's current views. And for me, that view is idealism. And but I'm not here to bang on about that. I'm here to talk generally about why philosophy is important. And so for me, it's kind of like it's for wisdom, it's for understanding, it's for insight. I mean, it's something I've been doing for years, kind of off and on. Did a degree in it, which is probably where I've done the least philosophy in the sort of last 20 years. But it's kind of always been there, and it's an interesting one because it's one of those things that kind of winds people up sometimes. And I confess that I've been there doing the winding up, not deliberately, but I think sometimes people find it just idiotic almost. They think, well, it's just such silly, childish questions. It hasn't all that been settled. We've got planes, trains, and automobiles now. Just shut up and get a job, kind of thing. Or with dotted lines to quantum mechanics, shut up and calculate. Right? Don't give any thought to the underlying reality that we're dealing in. Well, I think that's crazy. I mean, I know that we can't have every single person wandering around, pontificating about the nature of reality. But I think a fair portion of us should probably be doing that. And I think it's kind of I'd like to think that I can help by increasing those numbers somehow, which would be awesome, even if by one, right? Because I think it's important for people to actually reflect inwardly and outwardly, right? So this isn't about kind of sitting in a dark room somewhere doing mathematics on your own and trying to figure out the nature of the cosmos. It's about engaging with other minds, as Paul Byrne suggested the other day. It's implied that learning comes by facing novel perspectives and so on and so forth. And so it's philosophy for me is kind of not the same as an academic discipline. It's an activity. It's kind of a way of life. It's a way of mind, and it certainly helped me to manage some of my emotions and so on, because it helps me sometimes. No angel here, but it helps me sometimes sort of take a step back and try to digest and rationalize the situation that I find myself in, right? Without sort of giving up some sort of offering a knee-jerk reaction. Don't always succeed, obviously. So I think it can give us inner sort of peace and balance as well. But yeah, so back to that thing I mentioned a moment ago, how it can irk people because it seems like we're asking silly childlike questions. It's like the kid that goes, why, and some people almost frown at philosophy and say, oh God, they're just like the kids with vivid imaginations that never learn to shut up. And I can see why we get that sort of reputation. And it's also been variously described as kind of like science without the facts. So it's kind of the area of science that we can't prove is philosophy. I don't even agree with that. And I think it probably comes down to these two schools, these main schools of thought, if you like, all the way back to sort of Plato and Aristotle and so on. And those two schools are the school of rationalism and the school of empiricism. Rationalism as an approach, paradigm to philosophy is about armchair reasoning. So if you're a rationalist, you don't have to leave your house. You can literally sit at home, contemplate, think about concepts, nature of reality, and you can propose a system based on those insights. Whereas the empiricists say, nope, you've got to feel the dirt in your hands. You've got to go out there and feel the elements beating against you and so on and so forth. You've got to experience. You gain knowledge through experience, right? I mean, there's some interesting kind of eddies around this where you could say, well, hang on a minute, even the rationalist in his armchair is still experiencing his own mind in the armchair. So there's some fuzzy sort of dotted lines around this place. But for me, I'm kind of a bit of both. I mean, I like empirical science tells us stuff, but rationalism tells us stuff. I think we can reason stuff through, and we can form conclusions. I think we can even demonstrate and prove some of those conclusions using reason. I mean, I suppose the assumption there, the free miracle I'm implying there, is that reason actually works. It actually can deliver something. How we go about proving that, I'm not sure. But if we I mean, there's various philosophers that have written entire books about why language delivers no meaning. I mean, you just think, well, why do you even get out of bed in the morning? So there are certain basic kind of miracles that I'm claiming within philosophy, and that first sort of assumption, axiom, if you like, is that reason can deliver truth, right? I mean, you could offer a really basic demonstration of that, and just say, well, appeal to something like logic to see the kind of the inherent truthfulness of it. You say, well, all whales are mammals, right? Dave is a whale, therefore Dave is a mammal, right? And you can't disagree with that. And you see this kind of this insight coming up in theology as well, where you say, well, God is all powerful, right? Assuming you believe in God, and if you don't, it doesn't matter, just a thought experiment. God is all powerful except for logic. He can't breach logic. So you could say, well, so you could ask the question. I mean, it's a good fun one actually. If you feel like winding up some believers, ask them if God is all powerful, and they'll say yes, of course he is. So there's nothing he can't do. And they say, yep, of course that's true. And you say, well, can he build a rock that he can't lift? And that gets them kind of chasing their tails, really, because if he can't do it, then he's not all powerful, and if he can do it, then he's not all powerful because there's a rock that he can't lift. That's just kind of mean, though, and that's probably one of those kind of logical paradoxes that you can just use to trip people up for a laugh. But whether there's anything in it or not, I don't know. But the point is that logic seems to hold, right? You can't have a square triangle. I mean, perhaps in some sense, kind of, it's just an unfortunate property of language that it allows us to think of illogical things, right? Basically, because all we're doing is just stringing words together, and we're putting words together that aren't, shouldn't be associated, right? So the whole Golden Mountain thing and the square triangle, and just because we can say square triangle, right, it doesn't mean that there's any problem around, saying, oh well, how do we cope with that paradox? There is no paradox there, because when you said square, you've already delimited that concept to meaning something that isn't triangle, right? So anyway, you don't want to get into too deep here. So we're still thinking about philosophy. But I suppose what I just did there, I just randomly stumbled into something and started philosophizing about it, right? And sometimes that philosophizing is an appeal to another thinker, right? Nothing new under the sun, and we've got to build on the shoulders of giants. There's no point me sitting at home trying to develop my own new system from scratch. I mean, I've known people who've tried to do that and gone sort of slightly mad, and I just don't have the time. And it's a growing body of thought, so there is an existing corpus, right? And I mean, I think a balanced approach would be to sort of get acquainted with it to a degree, just to sort of get an introduction to the concepts and themes, and then put your own thoughts into it. I think you can do it the other way around, potentially. You could put your own thoughts together and then test them against previous ideas, that kind of thing. But it's a fun thing. I mean, it's a social thing, because everybody can participate in this. I mean, my view is that really, sort of under the bonnet, everyone's a philosopher. Everyone can remember being a child and wondering, what is the moon? What is sleep? Where do I go? Why are things still there when I'm not looking? And I mean, not everybody has this stuff. Perhaps some of us had a really enjoyable childhood, but I mean, I just used to gaze at ants, like just curious about why are they doing this, and how do they know where to go? So for me, philosophy is about curiosity, it's about wonder, it's about acceptance of ignorance. I mean, I can't remember which one. It was either Plato or Socrates said the admission of ignorance is the highest wisdom. And so for me, philosophy it differs from other disciplines in that actually it can celebrate its own ignorance and say, look, we just really don't know. But here's some well-reasoned speculation or some well-reasoned arguments that might get us to a place where we're less wrong, than where we are now. And so I do think I'm an optimist when I do think that it is possible to improve human understanding. I mean, in some sense, it's just fucking obvious, isn't it? I mean, we used to we literally, most of us used to think we're on a flat Earth because it kind of looks flat, right? And you could be forgiven for thinking that. But then, Copernicus and co, and some proper mathematicians, astronomers, and saying, well, nah, it can't be, And Magellan's voyage, see the boats going over the horizon, think, hang on a minute, why are those masts slowly yeah. But anyway, so it's about, so we can make progress, we are making progress. humanity is getting to know itself, right? I mean, you know my views on metaphysics if you listen to some of the other videos, that I'm an idealist, so I think in some sense the universe is getting to know itself writ large, right? And we are sort of certain vehicles within that process, right? And emphasis on the word process here. I mean, another kind of insight that came to me through philosophy. There's a particular character, Alfred North Whitehead. He worked with Russell. I think I mentioned him before, but he was like a process philosopher. So he said we need to move away from thinking of sort of objectified reality and stuff, and objects and permanent objects and stuff, and think of everything as a process, right? And there's some beautifully, I mean, it's extremely dense material. It's very hard to work through, but you can see that's onto something. I mean, there is no object, Matt Gray. There are processes that support this conscious reality, which we stick a label. We call this Matt Gray sort of for convenience, to know where he is and what he's doing and what he stands for and so on and so forth. But really, it's just there is a conscious agent here experiencing the world through this kind of physical manifestation. And that I might be some kind of unique, simple ape-like creature that has this kind of weird fizzing sort of self-awareness thing that just fizzes out when the ape creature dies. But I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that's first of all, that's an oversimplification. There's millions of assumptions within there, both logical and metaphysical. And I think that actually the idealist case is a more parsimonious position to have. Parsimony, I just mean, a simpler explanation. Just for the simple fact that materialists introduce a new metaphysical substance into the mix called matter. And for me, they say the hard problem is trying to explain consciousness in terms of the behaviour of matter, and I say, well, no, we've got the hard problem of matter. Why does consciousness manifest as this stuff, right? So, I mean, I think philosophy is just useful for mood and developing this kind of developing our minds, and potentially getting a little bit closer to the truth. And when we get a bit closer to the truth, I think it can be a bit scary. I mean, again, I think this is why some people shy away from it, because it's like, well, I don't want too much of my worldview undermined here, because I kind of use that to get out of bed in the morning and go to work, right? For me, I think that you can do both, right? You can live in this land of sort of reasoning and philosophical speculation, and that, which is awesome and imaginative and exciting and stuff, and you can still go to work. I mean, I'd rather none of us ever go to freaking work, to be honest. I hate the kind of sort of wage slavery that we've brought ourselves into, but that's another story. It's an absolute joke, everyone just wandering around miserable doing these sort of jobs they don't really want to do. But anyway, we'll get onto that some other point. So for me, philosophy is the answer. It's where to go if you don't want to go to religion, if you don't want to make your peace with some kind of really basic metaphysical system where you ask no questions and just say your prayers and go to bed and be a good boy. You can go and do that, or you can go into hardcore science where you end up with a kind of semi-religious scientism where you sort of think, well, we know what we're doing here. There's no room for spirits or transcendent stuff in this model. Or you could come to philosophy, which kind of welcomes everybody and says, well, okay, let's take a look at your ideas, see whether they make sense. Is there evidence for this? Both rational and empirical, right? Does the argument work? Is there any experience-based evidence for it? And what are our conclusions? What does this say about the nature of reality? This is what's fun, For me, I'm not even sure what else to do. I tried the whole kind of mainstream entertainment thing. I've been watching football, and I've just drifted away from that. I've drifted away from mainstream sort of TV now. I don't watch the news. I just, it's just, I don't know. This stuff makes so much more sense to me, and it seems to actually be about reality as well. Whereas watching the news and all these TV programs and stuff, it's just like, oh, well, this is the current cultural zeitgeist. This is what we're pushing at the moment, and there's some good stuff. There's some good box sets out there and stuff, but generally mainstream entertainment, it just looks like it's for children. So I've quite kind of strong views about stuff like that, and I think philosophy is the answer to it. And and that's probably enough for now. I just want to say one more thing though. This whole dumbing down thing. I'm not saying there's some evil custodian sort of doing this stuff to us, but I think there has been a dumbing down. Waterstones, right? They used to have a philosophy section, an entire section devoted to philosophy. You go in there now, it's crystal healing, right? I think maybe there's something in some of that homeopathy stuff. I'm not trying to discredit it, but I think it'd be great if people could stumble across Plato's Republic when they're in a bookshop, but I don't think that's possible anymore. Anyway, that's a bit of a strange kind of thing, but that's just my own personal experience. I mean, Christ, BBC used to have a program on, I think it was, what was it called? Brian McGee, and he was actually interviewing some of the great philosophers, contemporaries and stuff. So, I might dig some of that and link it on the site, because there's some really good introductions to, some of the key figures in philosophy. It's just awesome. So I'm really grateful for everyone sort of joining the group, and hopefully we can get some meetups together. I hope I'm making some sense, and I hope it's helping. Cheers, guys. Bye.